If you listen to a lot of autistic coaches online, they're going to tell you that unmasking fixes everything. And on one hand, I get it. I really do. Unmasking has helped me immensely with my nervous system regulation, with my general sense of well being. But the truth is, just like all those people pitching yoga as a fix for everything, pitching unmasking as a fix for everything does not just the actual concept of unmasking, but also you a huge disservice. And that's what we're going to talk about on this week's episode of the Chicken Yogi Show. This is the Chicken Yogi Show, hosted by the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. Kit is a spiritual mentor who shares spiritual wisdom to help neurodivergent people remember who they are. They believe that we all deserve full liberation and radical self-acceptance and love. Learn more and receive a free gift when you subscribe at chickenyogi.com. And now, this week's show. Welcome back to the Chicken Yogi Show. You might think that it's a bit odd for somebody who is so focused on autistic liberation and on helping you find your true stories and helping you live your authentic self. It may sound very odd for somebody who, thinks and shares these things with you to actually talk about how unmasking is not the cure-all that a lot of people say it is. And on the first hand, on one hand, I want to, make it very clear at the start of this podcast that I am all for unmasking. Unmasking has helped me immensely. But there's also a lot of risk involved in unmasking. There's a lot of fear involved in unmasking. And when you are dealing with burnout, or you are on the verge of burnout, or you are feeling like this could be burnout, but you can't really recognize it because, well, you're doing what you've always been doing. You're just tired all the time. Whatever stage of that you're in, if you add unmasking on top of all of that, then again, that adds an extra layer of anxiety, an extra layer of fear, an extra layer of, thinking and overthinking that can actually contribute to heading you into burnout faster. Let me explain what I mean, and let me explain my philosophy on unmasking. So, when you are going through your life as a neurodivergent person, and you have built up these mechanisms, these what we call masking, you have built up these mechanisms, perhaps the way you act at work, the way you have conversations with friends, the way you have to kind of put on a front or hide parts of yourself in social settings, maybe at a social club. And a lot of times these interactions leave you feeling like there's something wrong with you, like you're on the outside, like you're not quite fitting in. So when you have all of this going on, one of the things that many coaches recommend is to unmask. And again, I would say unmask, but I would add where it's safe and where it doesn't cause you additional stress. And so when you're headed towards burnout, when you're in that burnout, you need to be very careful with your energy. There's a lot of advice about how to get through burnout. I actually published an anthology, I'm sorry, I haven't published it yet. I have a call for submissions for an anthology talking about burnout. And one of the most ironic things about this is every time I mention it, people would say, oh, I would write for it, but I'm dealing with burnout. And so one of the things that's recommended is to pull back on responsibilities, on things that you're responsible for, on the things that you're doing. And in some cases, that would remove the need to mask. For example, stepping away from a social event or a social club for a few months. Then you won't be with those people. You won't need to mask with those people. The other thing that they say when you unmask is to start to live your authentic self. Well, I can tell you from personal experience that when you get to that point of you're in burnout and you know things have to change and you know you have to live authentically and you have to start being your authentic self, that at some point you actually wonder who you are. And that's why I talk about my spiritual coaching, helping you remember who you were before the world told you who you were supposed to be. There's a big process about that. And sometimes you can't fully unmask until you know who you are and how all those pieces of the puzzle fit in. So let's talk about unmasking in a way that doesn't contribute to burnout or that doesn't accelerate burnout. And when I talk about unmasking in this way, I always say start with yourself. We have masks that we put up to ourselves. We have masks where we suppress thoughts and feelings because we feel like we have to do this in order to go along to get along. When you're at a job, on some level, you want your job to be aligned with your values, with your beliefs. You want your job to be something you enjoy doing. On the other hand, there's this world we live in where you need to make money to survive. And life becomes very difficult when you don't have that steady income. And that income issue is a problem for many neurodivergent and disabled individuals. And so you may have a job that pays your bills. You may have a job where you work full time and it sucks and it sucks the life from you. But yet, yes, you could look for different jobs, but you know that you can't just simply walk away from that one. Although leaving that job would help you immensely with the burnout. It would help you immensely to be able to unmask. So there's a lot of nuance there, and there's a lot of dichotomies there that the unmask everywhere all the time advice really doesn't take into account. And I have found that in many cases, a lot of the people who go into coaching and consulting from a traditional life coach perspective actually do so from a point of privilege in their life. And what I mean by that is they often had a job that paid their bills. They often were able to work through things to make this neurotypical world work for themselves. And so their job is now they want to help you make this neurotypical world work for you. And in doing so, they end up reciting just a whole bunch of neurotypical talking points because that's what worked for them. And to them, the unmasking part of that comes into place where you play the neurotypical game, but you do so as your authentic self. And what happens with that is you still retain that layer of masking. You still retain the I want to play the neurotypical game. True unmasking, complete unmasking, actual liberation involves stepping completely outside of that, being comfortable with stepping completely outside of that, and forging your own path. And when you're dealing with burnout, when you're on the verge of burnout, that's a lot to contemplate. That's a lot to think about. So when we talk about unmasking as a cure, again, there's that cure narrative that I really don't like. Because again, there's layers of unmasking. There's the me that's around my family where I mask to some extent, but to other extents, no. I'm me and my family knows me, and this, we all roll together. That's kind of, how it all works. Also, there's some physical distance there, and I'm communicating over the phone. Being in person is completely different. So there's different layers of that. In the workplace, I believe that any neurodivergent person in a neurotypical workplace will have to always mask to some extent. That is a big reason why, for me, I'm very careful about the jobs I apply for. I'm very careful about what I'm looking for because I know, for example, working remotely is better because it gives me that distance and that allows me to unmask as much as I feel comfortable because I can be myself here in the office cabin while I'm still professional and masking to a certain extent in my written communications. And it's also why I prefer written communications to phone communications. I'm pretty unmasked. I'm pretty, what you get is what you see is what you get here on the podcast because I'm talking hopefully to my people. I'm talking to people who want to live more authentically, who want to drop the masks. But again, I'm doing that in increments and in layers, and I've reached the point where there's very little second guessing with the podcast. I say what I say, and if you don't like it, that's not my problem. But again, it took me a long time to get here, and I had to actually get through the burnout first before I could drop the masks. And I believe that that's how that works for a large majority of people. So when you think about unmasking and burnout, what sort of unmasking would lead to burnout? What sort of unmasking would hasten your burnout? The main goal of unmasking in a way that doesn't make your burnout worse or slide you into burnout is to do it slow and gradually. For example, take a period of time. It could be as small as 5 minutes. It could be as small as 60 seconds. But take a period of time when you're alone and unmask, stim, do what you need to do to regulate your emotions. Listen to your favorite song on repeat at loud volume. At this stage, I wouldn't recommend spending more than 30 or 60 minutes like this. The goal is to unmask, regulate your nervous system, stim, do what you need to do without feeling guilt or shame or self-conscious about it. Once you can do like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, go to 15 minutes, go to 30 minutes. At that point, when you're feeling pretty comfortable with yourself in your own skin, then you can take the next step to unmasking. And that would be to go to people who are close to you. They could be chosen family, they could be friends, they could be actual people who are, related to you. Then once you go to them, if you are comfortable enough, I would explain, hey, I'm trying to be more myself. I'm trying to feel more comfortable, and set some expectations. Tell them I may say things that sound odd, or I may say things that come across wrong. Please don't get mad at me. Please don't make me feel like I'm in trouble. You can certainly give me feedback, but explain what kind of feedback you want. And again, the goal would be to be yourself, to unmask around these special close people without feeling self-conscious, without feeling shame or guilt, to be comfortable with them as yourself. At that point, you can make some decisions about, do you wish to take this further and unmask in public? Would you unmask in public, say like running errands versus at your workplace? And you can take that as far as you need to do. But when you do that, always be mindful of your energy levels, how you feel, what's going on in your life at any given time. Because the last thing you want to do is put extra stress or pressure on yourself. Give yourself one more thing to do, and then that would threaten to tip you into burnout, or that could cause overwhelm, which could lead to burnout. And we don't want that. We want to have positive experiences as we unmask. And to do that, a slow, gradual process is much better than dropping the mask completely. Now, you may be so far into burnout that dropping the mask completely is the only thing you can do. There does come a point when you are absolutely bone deep exhausted, when you're, especially if you're doing what you need to do, you're going to your job, you're not experiencing absenteeism, you're taking care of family members, keeping up with house chores. If you're doing the things that you need to do, but you can feel yourself falling into burnout and there's just no way to reduce things from your plate, then at that point you may need to just completely drop the mask. And at that point, what happens. If you reach that point, any pressure you put on yourself, any feelings that you have of guilt or shame or self-consciousness are only going to add to your cognitive load, only going to add to your cognitive stress, and it's only going to make the burnout happen faster. So if at all possible, the goal is to catch it early so you can unmask in an incremental stage. But again, at some point, you reach the tipping point, and if you can't take anything else off your plate, then the only thing you can do is just fully, completely unmask, and what happens. This may seem a bit contradictory, and this may seem like a lot to think about. And so what I would say with that would be to, one, you know yourself best. You know what stage you're in. You know what you're doing as far as what your responsibilities are, where you might need to go, what you might need to do. You know what you can handle. Trust yourself. At some level, you have to trust yourself. At another level, your body is going to tell you what you need to do. And we need to listen to our bodies, even if it's kind of a conversation where your body's saying, hey, you need to slow down, and you can't. You still need to listen to your body and be aware of what you're doing. You need to take responsibility for that. There's a lot of people, when you talk about burnout and being unable to not take things off your plate, there's a lot of people who will tell you, well, your body's going to tell you that you have to. And I agree with that to some extent, but I also think that those people don't quite understand what it's like to live and work without support systems. Which means that we have to take all of this into consideration when you are thinking about unmasking in relation to your burnout. That you need to think about what you can handle, what you can't handle, what pressure you put on yourself. And you need to make sure that you're moving forward in a way that works safe for you. So as I wrap up this episode of the Chicken Yogi Show, I think what I want to leave you with is just a reminder that there are no one-size-fits-all fixes. There are no quick fixes. There are no cures. That if, there are people out there who tell you that unmasking will fix everything, unmasking in the wrong way may actually make things worse. And so it's a way for you to take what works for you, leave what doesn't work for you, and know that you're moving forward in a way that works best for your brain, for your body, for your mental health, for your cognitive load. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Chicken Yogi Show. You can certainly like and follow and subscribe wherever you're hearing my voice on most major podcast platforms. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at chickenyogi.com. There is a quiz that will help you kind of get an idea for where you're at with the burnout process. I call it the dark night of the soul. That's on the front page of chickenyogi.com. If you take that will kind of tell you where you're at, which may give you some ideas as far as how much or when you need to unmask. And I would love to chat with you about that. So if you have any questions, go ahead and contact me and reach out. I love hearing from our listeners. Thank you so much, and don't forget to crow and flow. Thank you for listening to the Chicken Yogi Show, hosted by the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. Kit's passion is creating neurodivergent liberation in all its forms through spiritual and creative mentoring. Remember who you were before you were told who you couldn't be. The Chicken Yogi Show is distributed on the Muse Charmer Network. Learn more at chickenyogi.com and subscribe to our newsletter while you're there for a free gift. Please follow the podcast at podcast.chickenyogi.com or on your favorite podcast app or platform, and check out all the shows on the Muse Charmer Network at musecharmer.com. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Music is Running with the Horses by Purple Planet Music. Their website is purple-planet.com. This show is copyright 2024, all rights reserved by the Chicken Yogi and Kit Kalestow.